Thanks for the support on the series, it means so much. So as a gift I've compiled the first season of the Rare Tanks series together. Enjoy.
Der Naubo Fatsoy.
The German Naubo Fatsoy, German for new build vehicle, a cover name, series of tank prototype were a first attempt to create a heavy tank for the Wehrmacht after Adolf Hitler had come to power. Multi-turreted, heavy and slow, they were not successful, which led to only 5 being produced. The rest of these were used for propaganda. Although the 3 out of 5 of the left remaining tanks were used in the Battle of Norway in the early 1940s. During the 1920s and 1930s, a number of military forces experimented with very large, and multi-turreted tanks. The British experimented with the Vickers A1E1 Independent in 1926, but only one of these were made. The Soviets also experimented with this sort of tank called the T-35. Development of the Naubo Fatsoy started in 1933 when the then Reichswehr gave a contract for the development of a Großtraktor, heavy tractor, to both Rheinmetall and Krupp. Großtraktor was a code name for the development of a heavy tank, Germany being still forbidden to develop tanks under the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. The technical details of the Vickers A1E1 Independent were then available to the Germans, as they were amongst the information sold to them by a British officer, Norman Bailey Stewart, who acted as a German spy before his arrest in 1933. Now for the technical details. The tank was crewed by 6, a commander, 2 machine gunners, a driver, a gunner and a loader. Its main armament was a 75mm KWKL/24 with a secondary coaxial 37mm KWKL-45 cannon. Its power plant was a 290 horsepower BWMVA engine, which let it be able to reach 30 km of maximum speed. It had an operational range of 120 km due to its 457-litre fuel tank. The Bob Semple tank was a tank designed by New Zealand Minister of Works Bob Semple during World War II. Originating out of the need to build military hardware from available materials, the tank was built from corrugated iron on a tractor base. Designed and built during a period of uncertainty in which New Zealand feared having to defend itself from Japanese invasion without external assistance, these tanks were a civilian effort to design and create a means to protect New Zealand. Designed and built without formal plans or blueprints, it had numerous design flaws and practical difficulties, and was never put into mass production or used in combat. New Zealand, like its neighbour Australia, had no indigenous armoured fighting vehicle industry. It was expected that armoured fighting vehicles would be provided from Britain. Australia and New Zealand did have some heavy industry that could be turned to the production of armour and armoured vehicles, but little had been done. The idea of mechanising the New Zealand Army had been suggested before the war, but without much progress. The use of the American Distance 6-ton tractor tank, a 1937 vehicle constructed of an armoured box on a Caterpillar Model 35 chassis which had been sold to Afghanistan, was suggested. Due to the limitations of requirements and resources, the tank was a functional failure. By using a large tractor as a base, and bolting on a hastily designed and poorly constructed tank superstructure, the resultant tanks were inadequately armoured, extremely heavy, 20 to 25 ton, unstable, restricted by tractor gearing to slow speeds, and had to stop to change gears. Furthermore, due to the shape of the underlying tractor and undue vibrations, shooting from the tank was both difficult and inevitably inaccurate. These limitations have caused the Bob Semple tank to frequently make lists of worst ever tanks. In the end, due to their impracticality, the tanks were disposed of by the Army. They had been given Army serial numbers NZ6292, held at Papakura, and NZ3494 and NZ3495, held at Burnham. One went to the Pacific in 1944, after being stripped of its armor. The 12.8 cm Selbstfahrerfett auf VK 30.01 Sturer Emil, German for stubborn Emil, was an experimental World War II German self-propelled anti-tank gun. It was based on the Henschel VK 30.01 chassis and armed with a Rheinmetall 12.8 cm K40L/61 gun, based on the 12.8 cm Flak 40. This gun could traverse 7 degrees to each side, elevate 10 degrees and depress -15 degrees. It carried 15 rounds for the main gun. The hulls were left over from Henschel's submission for the cancelled VK 30.01 heavy tank program, development of a 30-ton tank which led to the Tiger, but the hull was stretched and an extra road wheel added to its overlapped and interleaved Schotterloaf-work road wheel-based suspension system, to accommodate the large gun, which was mounted on a pedestal ahead of the engine. A large, open-topped fighting compartment, much like that fitted to the Panzer IV-based Hummel self-propelled 15 cm howitzer, was built where the turret was intended to go in the original design. Two vehicles, named after Max and Moritz, were built, both of which served on the Eastern Front. One vehicle was destroyed, the other captured at Stalingrad in January 1943, with 22 kill marks painted on the barrel. This captured vehicle is now displayed in the collection on the Kubinka Tank Museum.
Der Möbelwagen.
The 3.7 cm Flak auf Fahrgestell Panzerkampfwagen 4, SF, SD.KFZ. 161 thirds, nicknamed Mobilwagen, moving van, because of its boxy shape, was a self-propelled anti-aircraft gun built from the chassis of the Panzer IV tank. It was used by the Wehrmacht in the European theatre of World War II. In 1943, due to the waning ability of the Luftwaffe to combat enemy ground attack aircraft, ground-based anti-aircraft weaponry was becoming increasingly important to the Wehrmacht. In early 1943, the idea of creating a gun platform on the chassis of the Panzer IV was first proposed. The prototype displayed to Hitler on December 7, 1943, used the 2 cm Flak Vierling 38, which was deemed too weak for the latest aircraft, which were constantly being improved to fly higher and faster. Only a single prototype with this gun was produced before the design was rejected. A second design with an upgraded single 3.7 cm Flak 43 liters/89 was approved as a temporary stopgap until better Flak Panzers could be created. 240 Mobilwagens were built, and the first production models were put into service on the Western Front in April 1944. The Mobilwagen was built on Panzer IV chassis that had been damaged on the Eastern Front and returned to the factory for repair. These were fitted with an open-top superstructure that provided the gun mount. Around this, 4-hinged, 20mm armored plates were placed. These plates had two operating positions. They could be lowered for full 360-degree traverse, allowing flat or low-level firing, or they could be half-closed, being pinned together to hang slightly open. In this position, they had notches that allowed the gun full rotation, but only for firing at airborne targets. Still, both of these positions left the crew vulnerable. The fully closed position was only used for transport, when the plates would give the crew some protection from small arms fire and shrapnel. Though the Mobilwagen was intended to be a stopgap, it served the anti-aircraft platoons of the panzer divisions on the Western Front. Only 240 were produced, and it was eventually succeeded by the first true flak panzers, Wirbelwind and Ostwind, both of which provided the crew with improved armored protection and full rotation when firing at either ground or air targets.
The Bergetiger.
The Bergetiger was the name the Allied forces gave to a German World War II armored tracked vehicle based on the Tiger. The vehicle was found abandoned on a roadside in Italy with terminal engine problems. The main gun had been removed, and a boom and winch assembly had been fitted to the turret. No other Tiger tanks modified in this manner were ever recovered. At the time the vehicle was found, it was assumed the vehicle was intended as a tank recovery vehicle. Germans used the Berge prefix to denote recovery vehicle versions of tanks, such as the Berger Panther and Berger Panzer. Thus the Allies dubbed the vehicle they had found the Bergetiger. No official German name for this vehicle has ever been located. The Bergetiger's role as a recovery vehicle has been disputed ever since its discovery. The evidence often cited against it being a recovery vehicle is that its crane was not designed to tow the weight of a tank, nor was it equipped with any other common recovery equipment. A popular alternate theory is that the vehicle was field modified, possibly after suffering damage to the main gun, as either a mine-clearing vehicle or to drop explosives to clear battlefield obstacles. Reports of the number of Bergetigers produced varies. No original German documentation to support these numbers has been located. Some common numbers given are 58 produced from the factory, 3 produced from the factory, 3 built as field expedient modifications in Italy, 3 built as field expedient modifications, and 1 built from a Tiger damaged while still at the factory. Only 1 built as a field expedient in Italy. That's all for part 1, as this video is getting quite long. Subscribe to see part 2 next week. Also, leave a like if I should make longer videos more often. Thanks.